Hey class, welcome to Mr. Dwyer's episode on how to write a thesis statement. Today we're going to be looking at our prompt, was the Neolithic Revolution the worst mistake in the history of humankind? Now, you could look at that and say that's a simple yes or no question, and it kind of is. However, we're working at getting points in this class, writing like a historian, and for historians, we won't be working with simple yes or no answers. We will be working with thesis statements. Now, as I've mentioned in class, a thesis statement is fairly formulaic. There's a formula for writing a good thesis statement. First off, a thesis is basically an argument. That is, you have to have a point. Now, it's not an angry argument. You're not trying to yell at somebody and say they're wrong. It's just you have a point and you're going to make it. There's a few rules to follow when you're making a thesis statement. If you want to get a 4 out of your history class thesis statements, you need a counterclaim and a claim. You'll be seeing this in your English class as well. They're going to have that in a flipped order. They like the counterclaim at the end. History likes it at the beginning. Same concept, different order. Another thing is your thesis statement should have 2 to 3 arguments. We're going to start off with a 2-argument thesis statement. If you do feel like you have a strong third argument, I'll show you how to put that in your thesis statement as well. Now, your thesis statement will be limited to arguments. It will not have any evidence. Your evidence will come in the paragraphs that follow your thesis statement. They're not in your thesis statement. And the final big rule to keep in mind is no killer words. Over here on the right, we have our list of killer words. These are things you probably should avoid throughout the essay, not just your thesis statement, but if it is in your thesis statement, you'll instantly lose points. So don't say lot or lots. Say how many. Give me a number. Give me a fact. Another thing is I think and I believe. Man, those drive me nuts. They drive all history teachers nuts, so just don't use them. I hope it's what you think and what you believe, but overall, your history thesis statement needs to be based on evidence. And if it's evidence-based, you don't need this I think or I believe. All right, so for your evidence, we have several things that we've been looking at. Our most recent one is this set of readings on the oldest human remains. And remember, this talks about a pit of bones, it talks about murder, it talks about warfare, it talks about Kennewick Man. Analyzes, figure out what is strong evidence to answer this question, was the Neolithic Revolution the worst mistake in the history of humankind? And pull that out, highlight it, see how you could use it in an argument. Another big one that we used was the worst mistake in the history of the human race. So this is the reason for our thesis statement. We're kind of basing it on this guy's argument of, they had equality and free time and good diets and health. Does that really trump civilization? Because that's what the Neolithic Revolution is. It's an end to that hunter-gatherer lifestyle in the beginning of civilization. And if you go back far enough, you'll remember we had chapter 1 reading questions. You could use some of the evidence here to shape your answer. Remember the Stonehenge people. They're in a very early civilization. They didn't have writing, but they did have monumental architecture. They had relations with their neighbors, so they are a more complex society than just hunter-gatherers. So you could use them as well. And finally, I'm going to give you Hammurabi's Code. This is one of the oldest known sets of laws, and it was written down and displayed in the towns of Hammurabi that he ruled, so that everyone knew what the law was and the law would apply to everybody. So I'll have you guys read through this and decide, was this law an improvement over a lawless society? Because keep in mind that while you had hunter-gatherer societies probably had rules and expectations, there's no written laws. So written laws is a civilization thing. It's part of the Neolithic Revolution. All right. Now, what does a good thesis statement look like? I want to give you an example, but I don't want to answer your question. I don't want to take any of your ideas. So we're going to look at a new one. What is the best Star Wars movie? Hopefully you're familiar with Star Wars. It's one of the most iconic franchises there's ever been. Now, for evidence, we have several movies to choose from. Our first trilogy from the 1970s and early 80s, episodes 4, 5, and 6. This is what got Star Wars on the map, what rocked everyone's imagination and started to make it famous. In 1999, they started the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3. It got everybody excited about Star Wars again. And finally, we have our newest series, our newest trilogy, starring Rey, episodes 7, 8, and 9. All right, so we have lots of evidence of movies here. How are we going to decide which one is the best? Well, if it has Jar Jar Binks, it's obviously not going to win. So, sorry, episodes 1, 2, and 3, you're out. All right, what else do we want in a Star Wars movie? I know. Baby Yoda. Who does not love Baby Yoda? So I think our winner has to be The Mandalorian. Okay, one last rule. I know I had a whole page of rules, but here's one more thing to keep in mind. If you want to write a 4 level thesis statement, get an A on it, you'll need to have a counterclaim. To have a counterclaim, I have a quick, suggestion. Let's just make it a rule. Begin it with one of these 3 words: although, or phrase even though, or despite. For example, I have even though The Mandalorian does not have a single Jedi, it is still the best Star Wars movie because it has Baby Yoda. By beginning with one of these 3 words or phrases, even though, I'm kind of forcing myself to look at a counterclaim. What is the problem with The Mandalorian? Well, it doesn't have a single Jedi. So this is my first argument. Notice it's not a big argument. It's not something that you're going to be shouting at somebody about. It doesn't have a single Jedi, but it is something that needs explanation. It is something that you could build an entire paragraph on. Jedi are iconic to the Star Wars franchise, and The Mandalorian just does not have a single one. Yeah. My second argument number 2, is that it's best because it has Baby Yoda. Now, as I said, you can have a third argument. So on this one, I tacked on a third idea. The Mandalorian does not have a single Jedi. It is still the best movie because it has Baby Yoda, and the world needs more Mandalorian stories. Notice I just tagged it on with the word and. We're going to keep it simple, though. 2 arguments. Now, my next paragraph would go into a full paragraph about not having a single Jedi and why, despite that shortcoming, it is still a great movie. I can't just say, here's a big argument and leave it at that. I got to go into why it is still a great movie. And you can point out that Baby Yoda does have the Force just like Jedi, so the missing Jedi really isn't a shortcoming. Next, I would do a full paragraph about why Baby Yoda is key to a great Star Wars movie. Now, as I was writing this out, I realized that the baby part's supposed to be capitalized. I looked that up, did some proofreading, and Jedi is supposed to be capitalized too. And that's kind of one last rule to think about. I keep on throwing rules at you, but proofread. Make sure you have proper capitalization and punctuation. Right. So our assignment is going to be for you to write a thesis prompt. The big thing I'm going to be looking for is, can you write a 1-sentence answer to your question like I did right here with the Star Wars prompt? Next, what would be your arguments? If I ask for a bullet point of what your arguments would be, that's what I have down here. First argument, full paragraph about not having a single Jedi and why, despite that shortcoming, it's still a great movie. Second argument, another full paragraph about why Baby Yoda is key to a great Star Wars movie. We're not doing Star Wars, though. We are looking at the Neolithic Revolution. And was that the worst mistake in the history of humankind? Remember, it's not a simple yes or no answer. You're building a thesis statement. You're using the evidence. And try to make it interesting and fun. All right, if you have any questions, you can always find me at Dwyer at seedlessschools.com or .org. All right, good luck.